Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Alexander, I apologize for my late arrival. We're trying to cover 2 hearings. But I had some questions I wanted to ask about accreditation. Accreditors serve an incredibly important role in the higher education system, and they are the primary gatekeeper for federal aid. At a time when student debt is $1.2 trillion and federal funding is scarce, it's essential to ensure that our taxpayer dollars are going to schools that are good stewards of this investment. There seem to be some conflicts of interest that are inherent in the accreditation system. And I think it's important to talk about how those conflicts affect outcomes of the accreditors' evaluations. You know, accrediting agencies get paid by member colleges to be federally approved accrediting agencies. The accreditors must demonstrate wide acceptance of the policies and procedures in the higher education community. So my question is, does that mean if an accreditor is tough on its colleges, that the colleges can seek to unseat an accreditor just by claiming that the practices are not widely accepted? Anyone? Dr. Wolff?
My talk button is on. It's a very good question. And I know that we, as accrediting in the accrediting community, are challenged by the fact that it is a peer review process and our financial support does come from our institutions. We're quite aware of that fact. I will say, as one who has worked with accreditation, I have never seen my commission, or really in observing other commissions, shrink or shirk their responsibility to serve the public interest. In my view, this is where transparency plays a really important role. You need to see what we do. You need to see our team reports so that you would have confidence, and in the actions of our commission, that a perceived conflict of interest or potential one is not real.
I appreciate the point, but it seems to me that if accreditors are doing the main thing we need them to do, which is to crack down on poor performing schools, that there is a problem here, because then you've got at least some schools who are going to complain bitterly about the accreditation process. And so I raise it because it worries me. You know, the conflicts of interest we saw with the credit rating agencies in the financial services industry created some real problems for us. Unreliable assessments of financial products made those conflict-ridden credit agencies a key factor in bringing down our whole economic system. And in higher education, unreliable assessments of quality put both students and taxpayers at risk, particularly if they encourage students to go into debt or to go to colleges that are not providing a meaningful education. So I think we have to take a very close look at the role the federal government plays in exacerbating the conflict problem with the accrediting agencies. And so I want to ask another question about accreditation. I see that the process is very complex, that accreditors look at a number of factors and weigh them against one another to make an overall determination about institutional quality. I can imagine from the inside, assessing quality seems pretty complicated, but I have to say, from the outside, it doesn't look like it should be quite so hard. And I say that because the goal of accreditation, as I understand it, is not to distinguish the 50th best college from the 10th best college. The goal is to identify the schools that are of really low quality. And it seems to me that with just a few pieces of data, high student loan default rates, extremely low graduation rates, poor retention of students with Pell Grants, that it is possible to identify a school that is providing a poor quality education or that is wasting the government's resources. Now, I realize that may not tell us everything about what's going on at a college, but it gives the key information that this is a very risky place for a student to try to get an education. So what I want to understand is why accreditors aren't drawing a line in the sand so that it becomes immediately clear when a college is not serving its students well.
Thank you for the question, Senator. That's also a concern for me as well, and I think that I come from the specialized realm. So our programs are the programs that are accrediting the folks that become your doctors and your physical therapists, your engineers, people who could actually hurt someone if they are not doing their job appropriately and their education is not appropriate. We do draw a line in the sand. We can identify poor performing programs, and in fact, those programs never, in my experience, make it as far as an accredited process, as through our process to the point of accreditation.
So if the chairman will bear with me for just another minute on this, let me just see if I can push this. Let's ask a question specifically about undergraduate education. Should there be a bright line beyond which we say a school should not be accredited if there's a graduation rate that is so low that should mean, bright line, the school is not a school that should be accredited? If you don't have a graduation rate of 50% or 25% or 10% or 5%, should there be a bright line on this? Dr. Levine, what do you think?
Bright lines are tough. And the one thing I ought to say is, this panel, I'm the only one who doesn't have a dog in this hunt. So that I'm not from an accrediting agency. I'm no longer a college president. What I am is somebody who studies higher education.
Right.
And what I'd say about it is, if we have a 50% as the bright line, we've just closed every community college in the United States, I think, or pretty close. And part of what we're really looking at is, why is this attrition happening? Some people don't go there for degrees.
Fair enough. And there may be ways you have to step some of this in, but is there no number? 25%?
There are lots
5%?
of numbers.
1%? If you're not graduating somebody, why is this called a degree granting institution? Yeah, Dr. Phelan?
Excuse me, Senator, just a few comments. I think what you're speaking to is an expectation of increasing transparency, and I fully support that. However, to your bright line question, the question begs another, and that is, what is the unique circumstances in which this institution exists? Are you going to have the same bright line for a community college in inner city Chicago over rural Kansas, for example? It strikes me that as we come to some metric of what these should be, there has to be some understanding of the demographic, the SES, social economic condition of that environment, and then make some judgments. But even more importantly, I think, which is embedded in your question, is we need in accreditation to do a better job of being transparent and in ways that the average person can understand, not depths and piles and reports, but clear, understandable text about the quality of this institution. Let the parent and the student then decide, and they'll vote by their feet, and ultimately that school will close or lose its accreditation because they don't have students.
Well, I will stop here because the chair has been very patient in letting me go over time. But I will say on this, the important focus at the low-quality schools. We have got to give the information to our students and to the federal government so that we are not pouring more resources into a place that is not providing a top quality education, because those are resources that could have gone to schools that are willing to provide that education. And we should not be loading our students down with debt that they're going to be obligated to deal with for a lifetime when they didn't get an education in return for that. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.